And I guess I'll just put that again. So this is the main page. So you can see the courses, the individual courses are down here. There's 7 right now. And the first one is free. So if you want to enroll in the first one for free, just go ahead and click on this button over here, and you'll fill out a little form, and you'll get free enrollment for that one. Yes, so everyone's going to be muted for now, actually for the whole webinar. So if you have questions, just drop them in the chat. I'll be happy to get to them. All right, so let's just go ahead and get started. So yes, the purpose of this webinar is to cover the contents of what the Panda certification is going to consist of. So right now there are 7 courses, and each course is about 2 to 3 weeks long. There will be 2 lectures every week for 2 hours. And each course covers a somewhat small section of doing data analysis with the Pandas library. At the end of each 2 to 3 week course, there will be a certification exam. And I should have said that there will be, so twice a week, there'll be 2-hour classes. So about 4 hours of live instruction every week. And at the end of the course, there will be a certification exam, and I'll show you some questions or how that will be done. And whenever these are given again, you will be able to just take them whenever you want. You'll also get the All Access Pass, which is now 4 books and 2 other courses. It's about to be a 3rd course, actually. So you'll have an access to all future courses as well. So there's a lot of stuff that you'll get with this, in addition with the Pandas certification courses. All right, so here are the courses. The first one begins on Monday, and it's the simplest topics, selecting subsets of data in Pandas. So we cover nearly the entire library slowly and very thoroughly. And since they're all 2 to 3 weeks long, this will take about 16 weeks, I believe. There's some breaks in here. It's not continuous. And the classes will be recorded, so you'll be able to watch them at your own convenience. The first one is free, so that's 2 weeks of classes. And it's very likely there'll be more classes after the data visualization one on more advanced topics. But this is sort of the core of the library, of the Pandas library, and doing a data analysis with Pandas. But there are many more topics we can add here, and they will be added after the last course. But for now, this is what is scheduled. All right, so the main goal here, right? So I want to help you become an expert at data analysis. And the tool we're going to be using is the Pandas library, which is part of the Python ecosystem. It's one of the most popular libraries for doing data analysis. So when you're an expert, you should feel confident that you can produce trusted results in a professional environment. So this means, at work or at school, you can deliver, high quality work and feel confident that you're doing so correctly. So Pandas is let's say, a fairly difficult library to use, and even more difficult to use efficiently and effectively. There are many ways to, misuse the library, or there are many ways to get maybe a correct result, but perhaps not the most efficient way possible. So, my goal is to provide you that path to become that expert, and so that you can, confidently go into a job and use it, and people will trust the results that you've produced. All right, so the classes, the way I work my classes. So yes, there are live classes. I do live coding, and you'll see a little bit of live coding. I'm not gonna do a whole lot, but I'll do a little bit to give you a taste of what's in the Pandas library and what to expect. So I do have lots and lots of exercises. You will have assignments online that will be graded instantly. And every person will have access to these assignments, and I'll show you some in a little bit. And then there will be projects that will also be part of every course. And the projects are where you do multiple steps of a data analysis, putting several pieces together. The exercises are typically answering one single problem, but not putting together a whole lot of steps together. So the projects are where you do lots of steps together. The exercises are more just testing a single sorry if you hear my kids in the background. The exercises are for testing single concepts. All right, so a little bit about me. So I've written multiple books on the Pandas library. So the first one was actually down here, so Pandas Cookbook in 2017. I have a new book called Master Data Analysis with Python. This is the one that is continually updated and where most of the material will be coming from. I've also written a book on Python itself and on machine learning. And I've answered many, hundreds of questions on Stack Overflow. So I feel very confident that I've become an expert at using Pandas. I've written many, many blog posts. So you just look online, you should be able to find them. And I want to transfer that knowledge to you. So that's what I want to give everybody is all this work I've done in doing data analysis with Pandas and be able to relay it back to you so that you can become an expert and use it confidently. So I've also built a lot of Python libraries, so I don't just teach. And this is something I'm personally proud of. These are my they're more or less projects that do various there's just different tasks. Dexplo is unfinished actually. This is a duplication of or re-implementation of Pandas in my own way to make it faster and easier to use. Dexplot is for plotting. It's a re-implementation of Seaborn. Bar chart races for these racing bars. These two are for publishing, and this one is just started. But I do like to actually build some of the I like to build projects on my own, build libraries, and add to the Python ecosystem. So anyways, I believe I have good qualifications for helping you progress to become that expert and to really produce those trusted results. And I think these set of courses can really help you do that. All right, so any questions on overview? I'm going to get into some examples here of each one. So I'm going to look through each one of these, but if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. And if not, I'll just continue. All right, so I just want to cover one or two examples from each of the sections, each of the courses. So each one of these is 2 to 3 weeks. Most of them are 2 weeks. And so we're just going to look at a few examples here and then move on. So it's going to cover, essentially the main components of the Pandas library. So let's get started here. So Pandas, and I'm not going to do a whole lot of explanation. So if you have questions on the actual code, you can drop them in the chat, but I'm more focused on trying to, relay what's, in the certification. Okay, so a little bit on the on each section. So Pandas holds its data in something called a data frame, which is a two-dimensional row and column data structure. This is just some data on some bike rides. And the simplest thing you do, and you do this over and over again, and which is why I start here, is just selecting a subset, which just means selecting either some rows, some columns, or a combination of rows and columns. And the way you do subset selection, and this is how you do it with many different objects in Python, is with these square brackets appended directly to the object itself. Right? So we can select a single column of data, which returns a slightly different data structure called a series. It's just one column of data. Pandas has this thing called an index, which actually can trip you up quite a bit, and it labels the values. There's actually an index in a data frame as well. But just think of them as like names or labels for each value. So the rows have a label and the columns have a label. All right, so that's how you select a single column. You can select, multiple columns like this. So if I select, say, gender and trip duration, this will return a data frame. So this is two columns, and the way you select it is with a list. But there are many different types of selections, and that's so right off the bat, Pandas gets confusing in that you can select with something called integer location, and that's what iloc stands for. And you have brackets over here. So integer location is where you give the integers. So in this case, it's row, comma, column. So I'm going to select, say, from row 10 through row 20. And then I will, let's just say, select the last 5 columns over here. So this is the row selection, and this is the column selection. And so we select 10 rows and 5 columns, the last 5 columns. But you can also select by not just the integer location, but the labels. So that's what loc is. It's for the labels. So you can use the row labels themselves. And in this case, the row labels are just the integers, so they're not very interesting, but they could have been, strings or something. So let's say I want to select those rows, and then I want to select just a couple different columns. So that's how you do that. So this will select these rows with these labels and these columns with those labels. And then we'll learn about how to filter data. So, selection is one thing, but let's say you want to actually use the values to filter, but there is a query method. And say I want to find all of the bike rides that have a trip duration of greater than 1,000, and this is in seconds. So I can filter the data with the query method. So this is a handy method to look at the actual data to make some filtering. All right, so that's part of what's going to be covered in selecting subsets of data. And there's quite a lot to this. So all the sections here, I'm just showing a small sampling. There's much, much more to each one. So I'm just kind of showing some highlights here. All right, essential pandas commands. So after we can select data, we're just going to look at some very basic commands. So let's look ahead again at this bikes data set. And we'll look at series commands, which is just a single column of data. So let's take the wind speed column, for instance. And what I like to do is, we're going to look at numeric columns. So you process numeric columns differently than string columns, differently than date time columns. And we have all three in this data frame. So those are sort of three major different types of columns that you'll see in a Pandas data frame. So what I like to do is to break up the commands between those that aggregate and those that do not aggregate. So when I say aggregation, I mean methods that summarize the data with a single number. So this means like the sum, the min, the mean, the max, all of those summary statistics, right? So the mean, this is a single summary. This is an aggregation. But we have things that are not aggregations, like, sorting is obviously not an aggregation here, and it sorts from in ascending order by default. So yeah, we have some values here that are obviously not possible. These are, missing values, and so forth. So that's the difference between aggregation and non-aggregation. So we just, slowly build up. So that's what I focus on, is to very slowly get from one place to another and go deep into the subjects. So I don't gloss over anything. I spend a lot of time on each piece of the library so that, you can really understand it. And, we spend a good deal of time, mastering every part so that you can, become an expert. All right. Now, so numeric columns are processed differently than string columns. So if we look at a string column, let's look at this from station name, for instance, and I will just save it to a variable here called s. It'll be a little bit easier to access. Okay, so let's say, and these are just, where the station is. To access string columns, you look at this, this accessor in Pandas, which gives you special access to string only methods. And for instance, it looks like it's the streets are given as a corner. So maybe I can split, and it looks like there's a space before and after. And this is just a very simple thing. And I could split this. I could try to find the first street and the second street, and actually to do this, you'll have to access the string accessor one more time. And so this could be like the first street, and then I can also get the second street like this. So, string columns are processed very differently, and we'll cover that. Now, date time columns, such as this start time, are also processed differently, and I read this in as a date time, and I'll just, let's just call it S2. So you don't really take the mean of a date time, but you do get other things. Like if you wanted to get, say for instance, we just wanted to get the, not the seconds because there's no seconds, but say we wanted to extract the minute of this date time, you would use the minute attribute like that. So Pandas has this other accessor called DT, which is able to do that. So the point of this is that different columns are processed differently. And then we also just continue on, and once we do all these, commands on a series, we work on the data frame level, which is, all of the columns at once, or all of the rows at once. Okay, so that's the second one, essential Pandas commands. And there's a lot to this one. This one's actually 3 weeks long, so there's a ton of commands that are essential to use. And so we cover all of them. This is by no means not all the commands in Pandas. These are just the ones that are like the most essential basic commands. All right, grouping data. So above, what we did was apply a aggregation function to all of the data, which is fine. But a lot of times you're going to want to group your data into independent groups based on one particular variable. So instead of just getting the mean wind speed, I can do the mean wind speed by maybe this events column. So this events column, has the weather for the day. So I can group by that. And the way you do this is use the group by. So this one method is actually a very complex one. It has lots of branches out from it, and is one that you chain on. So if we look at, sorry, I will get the wind speed like this. If I want to get the mean of the wind speed for each event, we can do so like this, and you can see we have some. We'll have to work with these, with to figure out what to remove these negative values. And so it looks like different weather has different wind. So that's what grouping data is. And you can even group further by using something called a pivot table. That's when you have multiple grouping columns. So here we can have, again, events, and we could actually group it by gender. And then we could do wind speed. And this will actually automatically return the average here. And I like to round this. And we'll also throw in some stuff like, how to highlight certain values. So in this case, I'm just looking at the differences between the genders by event, and I'm calculating the mean wind speed. And then I'm just highlighting the one that is the max. So looks like they're very close, right? There's not much difference between the genders here. Either sleet or snow looks like are the highest. Okay, so that's grouping. And then we'll move on to time series, which is data collected over time, and where time is the main component. Stock market data is the classic example here, so I'll show that. This is some prices from Microsoft from the last 20 years. So we'll learn some things such as how to select data. So when you have date in the index, you can do some pretty cool selection here. So say I want to select a very specific time period. So from February 2010 until, say through, the next year, you could do something like this. And there's lots of different selections that Pandas allows here. So this shows all of those dates. We'll also learn how to do group over time. So we'll learn how to, say, group all of these by time. So say we want to find, I don't know, the average closing price per month. Well, there's a resample that allows you to group by month, and that's what that M is there for. And we can say the mean, and this will just return for every month in the database, the mean price at closing. Although we should use adjusted close. That accounts for splits. That's why it looks like, oh, Microsoft didn't change much in 20 years. Well, actually, it is quite a bit higher because it did split. Okay, so not all of our data. So that's, after time series, we will kind of go back a step and look at cleaning data. So as you probably know, lots of data is not going to be ready to be analyzed immediately. And here's just one simple example. So this is some plane crash data, a data set. And you're probably noticing these question marks here. And these are just missing values. So Pandas has lots of tools when you're reading in data. We can just say, all right, we want these missing values. When you see a question mark, don't actually use a question mark, which is a string, but use a real actual missing value, which is nan in Pandas. You'll also notice, say, take a look at this column over here, this aboard column. Right, there's 3 pieces of information here. So, and this isn't too uncommon. So you'll see this, well, there's multiple pieces of data in a single column. So here's the aboard column, and say we want to extract this. This is the total number of people, this is the number of passengers, and this is the crew. Well, we will learn some regular expressions, and this is a regular expression that will, regular expressions match patterns in text. So this is like its own syntax. So this particular one looks for digits. That's what this \d is. It looks for one or more digits. Then it looks for any number of non-digit characters. That's what the capital D is. And then it looks for another one or more digits. And then finally, and then another set of non-digit characters. And finally, the last set of one or more digits. So it can extract these, and there's a extract method that does this, and it can pull out that information. And notice here that these are missing values. There's nothing there, so you also get missing values there. So that is, so cleaning data will focus on issues like that. Joining data, so it's common to have multiple data frames, not just one. So here is we're connecting to a SQLite database. This is actually authors of machine learning papers. So here there's an authors table. Here is the paper authors table, sorry. And let's say we wanted to match up the author with the paper, then we could just merge these tables. So that if you know SQL, we'll learn how to do SQL-like joins. And we're just going to merge these two tables together so we can align up the paper ID with the author like this. All right, so that's joining data. And finally, visualization. So we'll cover the three sort of Matplotlib is probably the primary library for two-dimensional static visualization. Pandas wraps Matplotlib, and Seaborn also wraps Matplotlib. Wraps just means it uses it underneath. It doesn't really do any plotting on its own. So this is just one single plot from the Microsoft data set. So we'll learn all sorts of different plots and do a lot of analysis visually. So there's a lot more, but that's sort of a very quick taste of the 7 courses that we have planned right now. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Actually, one last thing, I do want to show so actually everybody can go here right now. You can actually take some classes right now. So there's a website called python.dunderdata.com. So this is a Jupyter notebook that anyone can access. So as long as you have a GitHub account, you can go to it. But what this does is, and this is how I have my assignments. And these are just some challenges that I've released. And this is kind of what it will look like. But there'll be a exercise like this, and this is actually a decent one, where there'll be a problem, and you have to. In this case, we're reading in deaths from Sweden from the coronavirus in 2020, and you have to do some data manipulation. Actually, you have to come up with this. This is sort of the answer you have to come up with. This is just an image of it. So, but this is the target. And what you do is you just put in your code right here, and then you submit it. And then once you submit your response, you'll go back over here and see if you have gotten it correct. So that's what I meant by automatic grading. So your assignments will be graded like that. So you get a lot of feedback. So I concentrate a lot on having really detailed solutions for the exercises. All right, so that's, again, that covers what I wanted to talk about. Does anybody have any questions on the certification? Okay, so the certification exams, they will be on here. There'll be many exercises, and you will take them online, and they will be graded, and they'll be released at the end of each course. And then if you pass the certification test, you'll be given the certification. And yeah, so if you want to try it, you can anybody can try these right now. You can just log on and you'll get access to all these challenges. And I'll have more free courses and stuff actually in the future. Challenges available for everyone. Yes. Yep. So there's 15 challenges right now. So they're all, or 14 actually. Yeah. You actually have access to more courses, like exercise Python. Right now, I have not. This is sort of meant to be a private course, but it's still open to for anybody who logs on. So you can actually get access to this one. Yeah. So if you want to access the challenge or any of the courses, what you do is you go to the assignments tab, and then you'll see all the courses that you have access to. And you can just pick that course and then open that notebook and submit it. It should say till the next Wednesday. So I don't know if I made a mistake there. I should have said April. So question on the first course. It is 4 days. So it's 2 Mondays and 2 Wednesdays. So just 2 weeks. So yeah, I think it should say April 7th then. So that's a typo. So I think the exercises are fun. I think it's a good way to learn. There will be projects as well. And by the end, you should have accumulated hundreds of completed exercises if you go through the whole course. So the projects will be, someone asked a question, what do the projects look like? So they'll be more comprehensive, more open-ended data analysis projects. And they'll be on the particular subject. As we go along, the projects are really where you'll incorporate multiple courses together, right? So you'll put together all the things that you've learned thus far, and they'll be open-ended, so they won't be as specific. So there'll be a broad question, and you'll have to create an analysis that, with the current knowledge that you have, that answers that tries to reach a conclusion and essentially builds a report. So that's what I'm looking for in these projects. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't had time to work on DexPlot. I did it very quickly. I wish I had more time. All right, I don't know if I missed any questions. Yes, so some of the projects, there's another question on seeking out the data. Yes, so some of the projects, not in the beginning, but certainly as we go along, you'll be using your own data sets. I'll encourage you to use your own data. Eventually you want to find data that you're interested in and not just the data sets that I have provided. So, there's lots of resources, obviously, out there. Kaggle is a good resource for data sets, but, government sites are also, quite good. City government sites also. So, yeah, so you should be transitioning from the public or the provided data sets to your own data sets as the course moves along. Are any final questions here? This is a question on just doing advanced classes. Yes, so the goal, the hope is to have several more classes, courses as we go along. And yeah, if you want to just sign up for particular courses, you could certainly do that. And but the first 7, yeah, if you they're still very fundamental. I find that even people who use pandas still have trouble with some of the fundamentals, just because it's a difficult library to use well and efficiently. So just even selecting like a subset of data, it can be painful. And I mean, I still remember how painful it was for me, and I think that's why that helped me develop this, is because I remember that pain. And um, it took a lot of teaching actually to figure out like sort of the best strategies to teach and what worked and what didn't. So there's a question how to get on the Slack channel. If you aren't, so everybody who signed up to this webinar should have, I think, received an invite to the Slack. If you did not, just email me. I would say, email me your email, and I'll make sure you're added. Thank you for the compliment. Yes, you're the best job conceptually simplifying pandas. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's because I've taught a lot. So what's really helped me out is the many hours I've taught live. So I've done a lot of live boot camps, and unfortunately, none over the past year and a half or so. But seeing the students make mistakes, the same ones, because we're not too different, and people tend to make similar mistakes, and being able to sort of predict those mistakes or anticipate those mistakes has, I think, helped me out. And then, just writing a lot helps out too. That helps clarify things in your own mind. All right. Are there any? I'm happy to answer a couple more questions if people have them. But if you have something you think of later, just email me, or you can drop it in Slack. I think I prefer email. Sure thing. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna sign off, and thanks for joining me. And yes, the first one is free, so you can just test it out. This is definitely the simplest course, but it's something you do in every data analysis. You're just selecting rows, selecting columns, querying the data, but extremely important to get right. And unfortunately, it takes a long time. We still have to, spend 8 hours of live classes doing it, but that just shows you, the many different ways to use pandas and how confusing it can be. All right, I'm going to sign off. Hope everybody has a good night.